Silence is a strange kind of power. Most people misunderstand it. They think silence means weakness, avoidance, or defeat. But in reality, the most dangerous strength a person can develop is the ability to stay silent when everyone expects them to react. Think about how people usually behave when they feel misunderstood. When someone ignores them, they send another message. When someone doubts their worth, they try harder to explain themselves. When someone walks away, they chase, hoping that one more conversation will finally make things clear. We live in a world where everyone is trying to prove something. Prove they're right. Prove they're worthy. Prove they deserve to be valued. And in that constant need to explain ourselves, we slowly give away our power. But the Stoics saw life differently. They believed that dignity doesn't beg to be understood. Strength doesn't chase attention. And wisdom doesn't waste energy trying to convince people who have already decided not to listen. To the Stoic mind, silence is not emptiness. It is discipline. It is control. It is the quiet confidence of someone who knows their value doesn't need to be explained. And once you truly understand the power of silence, the way you deal with people, conflict, and even rejection will never be the same again. There's something almost instinctive about the way people react when their value is questioned. The moment someone misunderstands us, we feel an urge to explain. When someone doubts us, we rush to defend ourselves. When someone walks away, we try to prove they made a mistake. It happens everywhere. You send a message and they don't reply. Your mind starts racing. Maybe they didn't see it. Maybe they're busy. So you send another one, just to make sure. Someone accuses you of something that isn't true. Instantly, you begin building your defense. You explain every detail, every intention, every reason behind your actions, hoping that if they just understood you better, everything would be fixed. And when someone rejects you, whether it's in relationships, friendships, or even work, many people respond the same way. They try to prove their worth. They try harder. They talk more. They explain more. They give more. Because deep down, we've been taught something our entire lives. If people don't see your value, you must show it to them. But here's the uncomfortable truth most people never realize. The more you try to convince someone of your value, the less valuable you appear. The more you explain yourself to people who already made up their minds, the more power you hand over to their judgment. And this is exactly where Stoic philosophy takes a completely different path. Stoics understood something that most people learn only after years of emotional exhaustion. They realized that constantly explaining yourself is not strength. It's often a quiet form of insecurity, a hidden fear of being misunderstood. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself that we waste far too much of our lives worrying about what other people think. Epictetus taught that the moment your peace depends on someone else's opinion, you've already surrendered control. So instead of chasing understanding, Stoics practiced something far more powerful. They practiced restraint. They didn't rush to defend themselves in every argument. They didn't fight for attention from people who were determined not to listen. And most importantly, they understood that silence can often say more than the longest explanation ever could. Because when you stop explaining, something interesting happens. People begin to reveal themselves. The truth becomes clearer. And the balance of power quietly shifts back to you. This brings us to a deeper question. Why is silence so powerful? To understand that, we need to explore 6 Stoic truths, 6 reasons why those who master silence rarely chase, beg, or explain themselves to the world. Silence makes them feel your absence. One of the most powerful shifts that happens when you stop explaining yourself is something most people don't expect. When you become silent, people begin to feel your absence. This may sound simple, but it goes against the way most people react to conflict or rejection. When someone pulls away from us, our first instinct is usually to close the distance. We reach out. We try to fix the situation. We explain how we feel. We try to make them understand. But strangely, the more we talk, the less our words seem to matter. When someone ignores your message and you send another one, your value in that moment quietly drops. When someone distances themselves and you chase after them, the dynamic changes without realizing it. You place yourself in the position of needing their attention more than they need your presence. And people can feel that. Now, imagine the opposite. You send a message. There is no response. Instead of sending another explanation, you simply stop. No long paragraphs. No emotional speeches. No attempts to convince them of your worth. Just silence. At first, nothing seems to happen. But slowly, something interesting begins to unfold. The space you once filled with attention, words, and energy suddenly disappears. And in that silence, your absence becomes noticeable. Because people often take constant presence for granted. But absence creates awareness. When you stop explaining, stop chasing, and stop reacting, people begin to ask questions they never asked before. Why didn't they respond? Why didn't they defend themselves? Why did they suddenly step back? As writer Albert Hubbard once said, "He who does not understand your silence will probably not understand your words." The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that some people will never truly listen to your explanations, no matter how clearly you speak. But silence forces something different. It forces reflection. When you refuse to chase attention, you send a quiet but powerful message. Your dignity is not negotiable. This doesn't come from ego or coldness. It comes from clarity, from understanding that if someone truly values you, they will notice when you step back. And if they don't notice, that silence reveals something important too. In the end, silence doesn't push people away. It simply reveals who actually cared about your presence in the first place. Silence helps you hear the truth. Most people are terrified of silence, not because silence is empty, but because silence is where the truth begins to speak. When something painful happens in life, the mind immediately looks for noise to escape it. We call friends. We scroll endlessly through social media. We replay conversations in our heads. We search for someone to tell us what we want to hear. Anything to avoid sitting quietly with our own thoughts. But here is the uncomfortable reality. The answers people chase outside are often already waiting inside them. They're just buried under noise. Think about what usually happens after a conflict, a breakup, or a betrayal. Your emotions explode. Anger, confusion, disappointment. And in that emotional storm, the instinct is to react, to send the message, to ask the question, to demand an explanation. But the Stoics understood something most people ignore. The mind cannot see clearly while it is loud. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." What he meant is simple but profound. Our suffering is often amplified by the stories we tell ourselves, the assumptions, the imagined scenarios, the desperate need to understand everything immediately. But when you step into silence, the storm begins to settle. At first, silence feels uncomfortable. Your thoughts race. Your emotions push you to react. But if you resist that urge and remain still, something remarkable happens. The truth begins to surface. You start noticing things you ignored before. You might realize that the person who hurt you had been showing the same pattern for months. You might recognize that you stayed in a situation longer than you should have. You might even discover that the pain you feel isn't because they left, but because you invested your energy in someone who never truly valued it. These realizations rarely come through arguments or explanations. They come in quiet moments. Moments when you stop trying to be understood and start trying to understand yourself. This is why Stoics valued reflection so deeply. They knew that wisdom grows in stillness. That clarity emerges when emotion is no longer controlling the mind. Silence doesn't just protect your dignity, it protects your perspective. And once you learn to listen to that quiet inner voice, you stop reacting to life impulsively and start responding with intention. Begging for closure is self-betrayal. There is a moment after someone hurts you when your mind becomes obsessed with one thing: closure. You want the explanation. You want the final conversation. You want that one honest answer that will make everything make sense. Your mind whispers, "If I could just talk to them one more time, maybe I'd finally understand." So you write the message. You rehearse what you will say. You imagine the conversation where everything is cleared up and the pain finally settles. But here is a truth that many people only learn after repeating the same painful cycle over and over again. Most of the time, the closure you are begging for will never come. And the more you chase it, the more you abandon yourself. Think about how these situations usually unfold. Someone disrespects you, disappears, or walks away without explanation. Instead of stepping back, you lean forward. You ask why. You try to understand. You try to reopen a door they already closed. But when someone has already decided to leave your life, your explanations rarely change anything. In fact, they often make things worse. You may send a thoughtful message explaining how you feel, hoping they will finally see your sincerity. But instead of clarity, You receive coldness, avoidance, or silence, and suddenly you realize something painful. You are trying to have a meaningful conversation with someone who already made peace with hurting you. Epictetus once said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." This idea applies perfectly here. Real strength isn't found in begging someone to understand your pain. It's found in quietly choosing dignity over desperation. Because closure does not always come from another person's words. Sometimes closure is a decision to accept that what they gave you was the best they were capable of giving. A decision to stop waiting for an apology that may never arrive. A decision to stop explaining your feelings to someone who already showed you how little they valued them. And when that realization arrives, something powerful happens. You stop chasing the final conversation. You stop replaying the past. You stop trying to force understanding where none exists. Instead, you allow silence to close the chapter. Not because the pain wasn't real, but because your self-respect is more important than one more explanation that will never change the ending. Silence reveals people's real nature. Here is a truth most people discover only after being hurt several times in life. Words can hide intentions. Silence cannot hide behavior. People can say almost anything. They can promise loyalty, explain their actions, apologize beautifully, and even convince you they truly care. Words are powerful tools, but they are also the easiest tools to manipulate. This is why many people stay trapped in confusing relationships for far too long. They listen to explanations instead of observing patterns. But silence changes everything. The moment you stop arguing, stop defending yourself, and stop engaging in endless conversations, something interesting begins to happen. The noise disappears, and what remains is behavior. And behavior is much harder to fake. Ralph Waldo Emerson once wrote, "What you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say." The Stoics understood this deeply. They didn't measure a person by their promises. They watched their actions over time. Silence gives you the space to do exactly that. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop feeding the emotional cycle that often keeps unhealthy dynamics alive. Instead of arguing back and forth, you step back and observe, and people begin to reveal themselves. The person who genuinely values you will eventually notice your silence and reach out with honesty. They will try to understand what happened, not to control the situation, but to repair it. The person who only valued the attention you gave them will slowly disappear. Without your constant presence, they lose interest because they were never invested in you in the first place. And the person who thrived on control may react with frustration or anger, not because your silence harmed them, but because they suddenly lost the power to provoke a reaction from you. This is the hidden power of silence. It removes the illusion created by words. When you stop talking, you stop participating in the story someone else may be trying to create about you. And in that quiet distance, the truth becomes much clearer. You start to notice who checks in when you're quiet, who disappears when you stop giving, who respects your space, and who tries to break it. In other words, silence becomes a filter. It separates those who truly value your presence from those who only valued your reactions. And once you see that difference clearly, you no longer need explanations. The truth has already revealed itself. Not explaining yourself shows confidence. One of the most difficult things for people to accept is being misunderstood. When someone forms the wrong opinion about you, the natural instinct is to correct it immediately. You want to defend your character. You want to clarify your intentions. You want to make sure they know who you truly are. So you start explaining. You explain why you did what you did. You explain what you really meant. You explain the reasons behind your decisions. And in many situations, that instinct feels completely justified. After all, nobody enjoys being judged unfairly. But Stoic philosophy asks a powerful question. Why are you trying so hard to control how others see you? Because the truth is, people rarely change their opinions because of long explanations. Most of the time, they see what they want to see. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself of something profound. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. In other words, your character should be demonstrated through your actions, not defended through endless explanations. This is where true confidence begins to show. A person who constantly tries to convince others of their value often appears unsure of it themselves. But someone who quietly continues living according to their principles sends a very different message. They don't need to argue. They don't need to justify every decision. They don't need everyone to agree with them. Because their sense of worth does not depend on public approval. This kind of calm confidence can be uncomfortable for people who expect emotional reactions. Some may even label you as distant, arrogant, or cold simply because you refuse to engage in unnecessary debates about your character. But what they are actually witnessing is self-assurance. You understand your intentions. You understand your values. You understand the reasons behind your choices. And once you have that inner clarity, the need to constantly explain yourself begins to fade. The Stoics believe that dignity is quiet. It does not argue for recognition. It does not chase validation. Instead, it simply stands firm. When you stop explaining yourself to every critic, every misunderstanding, and every judgment, something powerful happens. You reclaim your energy. You stop spending your life trying to manage other people's perceptions. And you start investing that energy where it truly matters, living according to your principles. Because real confidence does not speak the loudest. It stands the calmest. Quiet detachment teaches the lesson. There is a moment in life that changes everything. It's the moment when you finally stop arguing, stop explaining, stop trying to be understood, and you simply walk away. No dramatic message, no emotional speech, no final attempt to make them see your worth, just silence. And strangely, that quiet exit often teaches a lesson more powerful than any words ever could. Because most people are used to reactions, they expect arguments. They expect long explanations. They expect you to fight to stay in their lives. They expect you to prove your value, to defend yourself, to come back one more time. But when you don't, When you calmly detach and remove your presence from the situation, the entire dynamic changes. Suddenly, they are left alone with something they didn't expect: your absence. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And silence forces people to sit with that imagination, with the memory of how they treated you, with the realization that the energy they once had access to is no longer there. When you argue, people focus on the argument. When you explain, they focus on the explanation. But when you quietly walk away, they are left with something far more powerful. The consequence. Your detachment becomes the message. It says, "I value my peace more than I value this conflict." It says, "I will not stay where I am not respected." It says, "My dignity is not negotiable." And the truth is, this kind of calm detachment unsettles people, not because you attacked them, but because you stopped playing the emotional game they expected. The person who thought you would chase suddenly realizes you didn't. The person who thought you would beg suddenly sees you disappear. The person who believed they had control over your reactions discovers that they no longer do. That realization can be louder than any confrontation. Sometimes people learn from that distance. Sometimes they reflect, grow, and change. And sometimes they don't. But here is the deeper Stoic insight. The lesson was never only for them. It was for you. You learned that your peace is not something you negotiate. You learned that not every relationship deserves endless explanations. And most importantly, you learned that the strongest ending is often the quietest one. Because real power is not found in the last word. It's found in the strength to walk away without needing one. When silence becomes power, there comes a moment in life when you finally realize something most people spend years refusing to accept. You don't have to chase people to be valuable. You don't have to prove your worth to be respected. And you certainly don't have to explain yourself to people who already decided not to understand you. But many people spend half their lives doing exactly that. They chase attention. They chase validation. They chase the approval of people who were never truly listening in the first place. And every time they do, they unknowingly give away a small piece of their inner power. The Stoics understood a truth that feels almost rebellious in today's world. Sometimes the strongest response is none at all. When you stop running after people who walk away, when you stop proving your value to those who question it, when you stop explaining your intentions to those determined to misunderstand you, something powerful happens. Your energy returns to you. Your peace becomes protected. Your dignity becomes unshakable. Because silence is not weakness. Silence is control. It is the quiet strength of someone who knows their worth does not depend on anyone's approval. It is the calm confidence of someone who refuses to waste their life arguing for recognition. And once you truly understand this, everything changes. You stop trying to be heard in every room. And instead, you become the kind of person whose silence speaks louder than words ever could. As we reach the end of this reflection, one truth should be clearer than ever. You don't have to chase people to prove your value. You don't have to argue with every misunderstanding. And you don't have to explain yourself to those who were never willing to listen. The Stoics understood something that modern life often forgets. Your peace is too valuable to be negotiated through endless reactions. Silence is not weakness. Silence is control. It is the ability to hold your emotions steady when the world expects you to explode. It is the discipline to walk away when your dignity is being tested. It is the quiet strength of someone who knows their worth does not depend on someone else's approval. Silence is dignity. Silence is self-respect. Every time you choose not to chase, you reclaim your power. Every time you refuse to beg for understanding, you strengthen your character. And every time you walk away calmly from chaos, you protect the most valuable thing you have, your inner peace. So remember this simple Stoic reminder. Your silence may not win the argument, but it will help you win yourself back. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to like the video and share it with someone who might need to hear this today. And I want you to write this affirmation in the comments. My silence is my power. Subscribe to the channel for more Stoic wisdom every week, and continue building the kind of strength that doesn't need to shout to be heard.